Welcome to ScaleUp Soundbite. Today we've got Raj Senanayake.
Senanayake, yeah.
Naka. Oh, okay. Yeah, Senanayake. Who is Director of Delivery at Willis Towers Watson. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so it's my official title is Technology Delivery Director.
Technology Delivery Director. Yeah. TDD.
Yeah, TDD. That's right. A bit like testament development.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. For Willis Towers Watson, quite what I like to always, when we're recruiting for you guys, I always like to tell candidates, biggest insurance company that you've never heard of.
Yeah. So it's, we are quite a large company, and there's only, in that caliber, there's probably only about, I think, 3 or 4 in that size. We are in the insurance space, but actually more towards the risk and broking, as well as insurance consulting and obviously technology. So in my role, I'm in a division or a business unit called Insurance Consulting and Technology, ICT. And within that, part of it is consulting organization for insurers. The other side of it is a technology organization where we essentially build software, and that's where I fall. And I'm responsible for one of the product families within that organization.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. Perfect. So look, this is chats about you, how you got there, your career journey, and I think like what you're good at, which I really am excited about delving into, and that's about like building high-performing teams and implementing a high-performing tech-driven culture. So I'm hoping to get stuck in. So do you want to delve into your journey?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll tell you a little about myself.
Yeah, go on. Everyone loves talking about themselves.
Don't they? Oh, stop me. Please stop me. Yes, I guess I started, my journey sort of fairly traditional in the software development world, but I was always, as a kid, interested in technology. I think I got my first computer. My dad's a mechanical engineer, and he's a bit of a geek at heart. He bought me and my brother our first computer, when I was about 7, I think. And back then it was a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. We used to get these magazines with all the code written on it, and they were all games. So we used to type up all this code. Oh, okay. It was saved on a cassette, and it sounded like an old modem when you loaded it, that type of thing. So we used to do this. But for me, I guess I was always interested in what the code actually did and how it worked, and that got me down a journey of sort of learning basic programming, and actually learning how to do graphics and learning how to do sounds and all these things as a kid. That interest sort of stuck with me, I guess. I was also interested in electronics. I used to build these, again, that bought me all these Dick Smith kits type things. We build radios. And I remember building my first little, circuit board and, learning how to solder. And first time I built that, it's an amazing experience. Like you build something and you hear radio waves coming through something that you actually, back then it was AM radio.
Yeah, that's right.
And you hear the sound coming through this little crystal set, as you call it. It's an amazing experience, and these days you can get a little Arduino board or something, or Raspberry Pi, and do it's a ton of things. Back then there was no such thing, but so I guess that was kind of my first, as a kid getting into technology. At university, studied similar things in electronics and software engineering. Started off as a software engineer. And then sort of progressed through the career as a,
what led you to into software engineering as opposed to electronics? It sounds like you're playing with both there.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think a lot of it probably came down to opportunity at the time as well, and, the kind of jobs that were available and the kind of thing I wanted to do. I probably could have gone either way, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and it's just sort of the opportunity leads you down a certain path. And I started going down the software side. That was always interesting to me, but it was quite interesting because during my career at different points, I ended up always going back to touching the hardware side of things. So very early in my career, I was when I first started. We were developing software for handheld devices for freight companies. So basically like these, the folks who come around to your do your deliveries, but they'll have like a handheld device to scan your consignment note and so on. So the software that ran on that, we used to write that and the big freight management systems behind it as well. So we used to go to depots around the country and upgrade all this hardware and the software along with it. Then later on, I was in energy for a long time in my career, in the energy space and working for companies like Itron and some startups as well. And in those, we were always dealing with hardware. We wrote the software, but software/firmware that worked with either handheld devices or metering devices or even IoT technology. So got into a lot of that as well at certain points. And that was really interesting. So I had these touch points, but predominantly ended up on the software side. I guess that's where my career path sort of led me.
Cool.
But I enjoy both, to be quite fair. Yeah. You never know where the next one's going to take me. Who knows?
Okay, cool. And how'd you end up into leadership where you are now?
Yeah. So leadership's been, it's not, interestingly, coming into this, I was sort of thinking about it, you kind of retrospectively look at what really, led me there. It's not something I purposely went into. Like it wasn't, it's almost an area, I guess I was sort of thrust into at certain points. And I figured out a lot of things along the way. So I think earlier in my career, I was driven for outcome driven in a sense. I wanted to see things get done. I wanted to see, so I was dealing, for example, very early in my career as a software engineer, I was talking to clients and various customers and trying to solve problems for them and saying, I just wish we could just do this one extra thing. And I was like, I could just make 2 lines of code change here and that could work. And then, how do we do that? Okay, that means that I need to. So I had to work with a few people to sort of lead the charge, so to speak, to get that done. And I found that quite interesting and exciting to be able to be the change, or sort of lead the change in a way. I guess in a way that got me into sort of being a little bit more, not so much a manager, but a leader in that sense, and sort of team leading type activities and roles. At first it was little mini projects and then bigger projects. And the next thing your managers would tell you, your bosses would tell you, okay, could you please lead the charge on this one? And then that sort of leads to something else, and that became bigger. And I guess if success came along, not to mention lots of failures along the way, but success came along, and those led to bigger and bigger and bigger things, and that also obviously then led to bigger teams and bigger products and so on. So that kind of led me down this leadership sort of path, and I guess it started off as technical leadership, but quickly it sort of also brought in people leadership and then team leadership, and sort of just, really, again, then delivery of product as well, and delivery of programs and so on. So, it just got bigger and bigger, I guess, as time went on. Yeah. You just reminded me of the first podcast I did with Dave Bolton, and he's been CTO of a few, pretty well-known companies, but he just said it was something that I never really considered when I was young. And I was like, that's super interesting. And when I talk to people about it, I always think that, that's an end goal for a lot of people is to get to that CTO level. That's where I want to go. But you just said it yourself. It was like leadership wasn't something that I considered. So it goes back to the questions like, are leaders born or are they like made? And like if they're born, it's like, I think it's like people identifying those qualities in people. Yeah. And then, okay, cool, we can work with them. Let's find them. Let's go. And then it sounds like that sort of happened with you. I know that's how he described it. It's like I was identified by some seniors as something to do, and the doors open for me. So he had luck involved in that, but it was like the hard work of what he did to get there, but he didn't know he was doing it. So, yeah. It's very true, that question about whether you're born into it or whether you grow up with that, or you're sort of born with that kind of that thing inside you that wants you to lead, or whether you can learn it. I think both are true to a certain extent. Sure. It's really funny when I was sort of first taking on some leadership roles and sort of became an engineering manager, for example. I remember one of my senior leaders, and I was incredibly lucky in my career because I had some excellent mentors and other leaders, senior managers, directors, VPs, etc., who were very, guiding and giving me advice. And, and even now I have this incredible bunch of people that I can always reach out to and ask a question. What should I do? And I would encourage everyone to build that mentor relationship along their pathway. I remember someone telling me, "Oh, as you're a natural leader, you should do more leadership." And I was like, "Really? What does?" I didn't even know what that meant. Yeah. Well, what does that mean? I don't think he really explained it, but it took me many years to figure out, what does leadership really mean? Because in a lot of ways, you learn a lot of these as you go, and you have to look retrospectively, but introspectively, take a look at yourself in the mirror and say, what is it about me that I think I need to improve?
Yep.
And it's a constant learning journey along those lines. But if someone really wants to be a leader, highly encourage. Like if that's the goal, I think that's okay too, because I think that means that you'll have a passion for it, and you want to do it, and that itself is a driver. But then it's important for them to ask, why do I want to be a leader? Or what's the, do I just sort of want to lead because, I sort of want to sort of be the one to set the tone for the team or set the direction for the team. But then you ask your question, why do I want to do that? I think it's important to always start with why,
like Simon.
Like the Simon book, Simon Sinek. Yes, exactly. So it's a great book, by the way.
Yes.
But it's really important to ask yourself, what is it? Because I think otherwise you don't know what your driver is, your internal driver is, and it's important to know what your internal driver is. And if it is really because, let's say, you're in a situation where you want to build a particular product for a particular market or a particular client base, and that's your driver, then that will always drive you. And that might mean you need to lead with technology, lead a team of people. You might need to lead a bunch of, lead maybe even an industry. Who knows? To get to that point. And things get hard at some point. It always does. Or and getting over obstacles is what leadership is about, really. So then, when it gets hard, the thing that motivates you, gets you up in the morning and makes you do it again and again and again, despite of failures, is that why within you. So it's really important, I think, to identify that why to drive it. And on the flip side, there are those who are thrust into leadership roles who may find they absolutely do not like it, And
sure. I've seen a lot of people go back and
absolutely,
sure,
absolutely. And I've been in the situations where I've given leadership roles to some of my colleagues who I thought this person would be a fantastic leader. Yeah, they're so good with people, and they're great at what they do, technically brilliant. Let's do it. And in some cases, they would flat out say no. In other cases, I'll give it a shot. But and then 6 months later, or 1 year later, they'll say this is not really for me, and they'll take a step back. From that, and that is completely fine, because that's how you discover what you like and what you don't like, and it's not for everybody. But the other thing I want to say too is, like, leadership is not just about people leadership. You do have technical leadership, and you could be an architect or a technical leader, or even an individual contributor, an IC into a independent contributor to in a team. And still be in a leadership role, in the sense that you might be the subject matter expert of a certain area, and when people have questions, or how do we do that, you turn to that person and say, and they're the one to give you that answer, and that is leadership. So it's not always about people. It's really so many different aspects to leadership, and I think as you get more senior and you learn more things, we end up falling into these leadership areas. But which path you want to take is completely up to people. My only encouragement would be for everyone to give it a shot, try it, and if it doesn't work, try something else, and that's fine too. And you will eventually find the thing that you like.
You'll learn,
and that's great. And if that's also not, if leadership is not for you, that's completely fine too. It's not.
I think it's you touched on a lot of things there as well, and leadership does take a lot of different avenues of what I've seen, and you said it could be like an encompassing area of what that means. So it's funny, like you touched on a few things like people leadership, technology leadership, and even your own career. You said I started off with technology, and then was a leader in there. Then people, then teams, and then delivery was what you just mentioned there. And it's funny, the podcast we just did recently with Simran Guman, he mentioned the engineering trifecta of like what makes a good leader in a tech team, and it's not all three. It's a mix of two of the three that you need to be good at. Or if you're good at all three, you're basically a unicorn.
Right.
But what would happen to someone over time is, and it sounds like it's happened to you, is you'll be a mix of the two, or you could be a mix of the three, or two of the three, but at different times. So tech and people and tech, delivery and people maybe, or delivery and tech. So but you have that foundational knowledge. Usually, because the tech roles is going to come from technology in some point, and then learn to see where you're good at in others. So that was nice. When you just mentioned your sort of career path, then that immediately I was like, that sounds like super interesting to where you are.
It's very, very true. It's true. And I think you gravitate towards a thing that you like and the thing you're good at perhaps as well at the same time, which I think is really nice. And to be honest, as your career grows and you take on bigger roles and bigger teams and bigger problems to solve, you will come to a point when you have to choose whether because you run out of time in the day. We all have the same 24 hours, and so it's like, do I focus more on the technology side and put a lot of energy there to get that right and drive technology leadership, or do I do a little bit of more people management and help people, because they're both incredibly satisfying things to do. So in the people leadership, you really get to help people's careers. You get to see them grow. And one of the most fantastic things is, for me personally, has been dealing with working with a lot of engineers who I've recruited as junior engineers who are now in quite senior roles. It's just wonderful to see that sort of thing. And just to see that growth and to be some small part in that growth process, and people who I can even call friends and call up anytime and have a beer with or whatever. That's great. But then at the same time, there are others who are like that technology leadership side. You could go down that path and still, look at amazing things you've been able to build over time and just point and go, that was part of it. But you will always touch a bit of that, because I think particularly in technology delivery, you do need to touch a bit of everything along the way, but you might focus more heavily on one side, depending on what your role is, and your role sometimes changes from organization to organization as well.
Discussed as well, The organization will change, depending on where your skill set lies.
I think, I mean, it's interesting because I was thinking about some of the leadership principles as well, and that's really good. The trifecta, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's, I was thinking of leadership as sort of
what principles?
What principles do you want to, what other things that you think? So I was thinking, some of the things I think as a leader I feel like is important, or at least I've learned along the way, is that, you do want to set clear goals, for your team, because they look to where do we need to go next and where do you want to go, the why behind things, that sort of stuff. So I think the goal setting is very, very, and it's not just the annual goal setting. It's more about why do we want to do the thing we're doing? Why are we building this product? What's the reason for it? What do we actually trying to get to at the end? It might be customer acquisition. It might be trying to win a tender for a certain, for a certain client or customer. It could be, you want to get to that next stage in your startup journey because your runway is only so long, and if you don't get these following things out and get certain amounts of funding, you're dead. So that could be the reason. It's like, and another thing I was noting is that building trust with your team, kind of important as a leader, because I think they need to, building trust is something about just empowering your teams to do because as a leader, you provide direction, but the best you can do is ask people. You can't really, although we can try to tell people what to do, it doesn't really work that way. You got to kind of ask, and people may do things that you request of them out of respect or because of seniority or whatever, but really if you really want people to get behind you, they need to trust in your judgment, but also, so having that open communication and how do you build trust? It's a whole podcast on its own, but it's kind of like, you do have to be as honest and open as you can be, because I think things will invariably go wrong in any journey. And then just about being honest about, okay, that didn't work. We got to change tact. Let's try something else. That type of thing. And so it's important that the team, you work with a level of trust, and it goes both ways. They need to trust the leader, but the leader also need to be able to trust the team that they're working with as well. And so that honesty, level of honesty, the level of competence that they bring into the equation, it all sort of plays a part of that trust picture. As well. So it's quite good. Leaders are always accountable, at the end of the day, and accountability and ownership is a big part, and I think that's, again, a big topic, but, you do have to be, accountable, and a good way to do that is to sort of say, you do what you say you're going to do, or if you say, okay, and again, that honesty part of it is like, okay, if, particularly in the startup world, and I'm sure, Sam, you deal with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which
and things are incredibly, they move on your feet, and they can move very quickly.
Yeah, 100%.
And you do have to pivot regularly. In large organizations, the pivots are not they still happen quite regularly, but the high level vision may not change, that rapidly, because, you have probably a more solid base that you're working from. But when they do change, you got to be accountable as a leader to your team, but also that honesty factor of, okay, this is why we're changing. Here's what we need to do, and it happens. It happens everywhere, and that's a big part of it. And I think, and I think the other one I wanted to touch on was always as a leader, I think it's important to target for your team to be a high performing team. Always target that, because you want to be successful, and you owe it to your team and your organization and your product to be successful as a leader.
Yeah.
So if you want to take on leadership, no matter what leadership style we were talking about earlier, target for the people that you're working to be high performing, and I think that is super key and critical for your success and for your organization's success and your company's success and so on. So I think that is a key, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Touched on so many great points there, and I think a lot of things that are echoed in a lot of the study that I've just read up, and got to quote a book here, practically in Lee and Sony's hardest functions of a team. So you're just saying it all starts from trust, right? Yep. And then that top of the pyramid of what you just said of accountability, which is the top of that pyramid. So and then clear, concise communication would be like attention to results, and just. It was pretty interesting to hear what you deem to be, core characteristics of creating that team, and then now moving into that high performing team, and creating that culture around a high performing team. So, what is a high performing team, or what are the characteristics of a high performing team? Yeah,
good question. It's a pretty big topic. People have obviously build careers around this stuff as well, and I think the easiest way to think about a high-performing team is like the sporting analogy.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it is very easy to look at what's a great sporting team versus a good sporting team, and a great sporting team is the ones who are always on the top of the ladder or somewhere near the top of the ladder. It doesn't mean they always win their games, but more often than not, they will win the games. And they're the ones who are sort of at the top. And in another aspect, another high performing team you could think of in the military sense, like you got people like the SAS, like they're like at that top of the game of that sense, or you could think of the Navy SEALs, so to speak. But in a tech sense, in the technology world, is more the teams that are often able to get to that result of building a product faster, or they seem to be able to build it faster. They seem to be able to get to the right results sooner than others and actually get to market faster. Those are the kind of teams you're looking at. So it's a good point. Like what are the things that make teams? So I look at it sort of from from a point of view of, and this is not just my view, but I guess learned from various, people and books and listening. So I can't take credit for this stuff really. Yeah. But it's about how do these teams win more often than they're not, and how do they actually be able to be so consistent in what they do? So a few things again that comes to mind is about going back to that sort of that clear, having a very clear goal.
Yeah.
Your goal and the vision that comes down from your organization or from your managers or your team leader or whoever is that driving force, it has to be quite clear. You all got to, the team as a whole has to be able to head towards the same goal and rowing in the same direction, so to speak. And that is super, super critical. It needs to be clear. And also that goal, although your goal might be to win, and, if you take a sporting analogy again, obviously there's goals, score more goals, okay, that's fair enough. But the strategies you follow changes depending on the team you're playing against, and also depending on the elements of the day. Is it raining? Is the ground muddy? All of that sort of stuff comes into play. So in the technology world, again, so many things will come into play. And then, so how does that then play into a high-performing team? The ability to adapt very quickly to changing conditions, pivots, being agile, the age-old thing. What does that really mean? It's just, being able to react to conditions very quickly and to current things unforeseen. You go onto the pitch and all of a sudden, oh, it starts raining. Now it's wet. Oh, what do I do? If you're not prepared for that, all of a sudden you're kind of in trouble. Yeah. So that's a big part of it, that agility that you bring, and to be able to adapt very quickly to the conditions and market conditions or your competition changing. Something happens and then you need to adapt quickly. Obviously, being able to collaborate, communicate. If you take any high-performing team, generally, like whether it's a sporting team or a technology team or a military or whatever, you always find that they communicate very effectively. Yeah. And part of that is definitely a part of that is about one-to-one communication and team leadership down to the team and being able to then push the backs. But a lot of it is also on that having an overall picture visible. Where are you? You don't know where you're going.
Have you ever seen, and going back into, sorry to interrupt you, but particularly in communication, and when I've seen people work really well together, but I find I wanted to ask you this question is, if in your own experience, when you've led high-performing tech teams, have you ever seen people gel together with their own style of communication?
It depends on the style. I think there's definitely some very distinct different styles. Like if you do the Myers-Briggs style, tests and so on, you see so many different styles of communication. There's at least, according to the experts, there are at least 4 different styles, of communication. I think it's important, and one of the things for high-performing teams is to understand the style of the other people in your team. Yep. And that can be done through some of these sort of assessments that we do. Sometimes it's intuitive as well. But it's not intuitive to everyone, because there are those who are very analytical. There's those who are drivers, who like to always sort of be the one with sort of driving the way forward. There are those who are quite always collaborative and looking to work as a team. There's all these different styles of working. I think for any high-performing team, it's super important that you understand the strengths and the communication styles of the other people around you, because you will always have quite a variety of them in any given team.
That's right.
And to be able to know how to best communicate with them, but also how they communicate with you, both ways, because the communication is a two-way thing. Yeah. And if I'm being completely honest, I think my take is that communication is actually more about listening than about speaking.
Yeah.
So to be able to not just hear what people say, but to actually understand and to listen and understand what they mean is, I think, often lost in certain communications. So for that to be effective, it is really important to understand the different styles of communication. So like, if I'm kind of person, Sam, that I like talking a lot, but I don't listen, and you're like a person who likes listening, but don't really not very extroverted and like talking a lot. And if I'm just doing this talking like I'm doing now, you'd be just listening going, I got something to say, but you never get that,
Opportunity to say it.
Yeah. But you might have the most brilliant idea and I'll never hear it,
But then sometimes if you just like talking and hearing it, so you're never going to hear it anyway. Because even if I said it, it's probably going to go on. If that's on personality anyway.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so and going back to that sporting analogy, like, you have these different players on a team who have different strengths.
That's right. Striker, midfielder, defender. Yep.
You can't have 10 strikers on the field.
No.
It's never going to work, is it? So, I mean, when you look at it that way, it simplifies the problem. It's like, so even in a scrum team or even bigger teams, you got to have those different kind of personalities that, as a great book that I read called Radical Candor, and I was going to talk about that. But that talks about you have these different kind of personalities. Like, so Kim Scott, who wrote this book, is talking about you got these rock stars in teams, and then you have superstars in teams. And I've never heard it put this way before, but it made a lot of sense. Like, superstars are people who are like great at coming up with amazing visions and ideas, and they're sort of the ones who just bring these sort of fantastic things into the team, but they not always might be the ones to do the day-to-day grind. Just get through the stuff and get through support tickets and get through some of the day-to-day activity that has to happen. And those are the rock stars. They're like the bedrock of your team that just get through all of that. So it's a different way of looking at what a rock star is. We think a rock star is a guy who's playing the lead guitar and out there, But the rock stars in this context, I suppose, is those ones who are just getting through that work. And you need them. Imagine if you didn't have them in your team. Who's going to do all that? Because the superstars will never do or would not like doing it. Or if they did it, they'll do it half-heartedly or, do it for a short while or whatever. So you need this different kind of people in your team to really make it work. So I think, you need a really multifaceted team. And I think when you recruit, as you know, you guys do a lot of it, and you do need to be mindful of building the right kind of team. And I think recruitment is a big part of building that high-performing team and recruitment, or whether you bring in internal recruitment or external recruitment, or just bringing in a team, you do want to make sure you have a good balance as well. So it's important that you think of all of those sort of aspects as well.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And how does a team, this might be a little bit of a different question, but so creating and influencing a tech culture, so a high performing tech culture, what have you experienced any challenges in your career where you've gone into and have had to change that tech culture?
Yeah, good question. I think in my career, in some cases, I had to build a team from more or less ground up. I recall being when I used to work at Itron. When you first started there, in my role, we were a team of 3.
All right. Good.
I think by the time we left, we were probably exceeding 50, and that for an engineering team, that's relatively large, because we had offshore teams and onshore teams and teams in Sydney and Melbourne and so on. In that scenario, your culture is sort of built. You got to be mindful of the culture you build, and I'll be completely honest, like as a leader and a leader who's learning on the fly as well. You don't know a lot of the things you don't know at the time. So you're learning from learning by talking to your leaders, and trying to sort of absorb as much as you can, asking a lot of questions, reading, listening to things, podcasts, etc., whatever, reading books. But you're building it as you go. So that's one side of it. But I've also worked at some startup and late stage startups and Series C, D type areas where I was brought in really to try to help get things going as well, and sort of brought in to really help the people to kind of and that really required me to have a lot of conversations, understand the point of view of different people. There was some clashes in understanding of, what works, what doesn't work, or there was some personality type issues and, trying to get to the bottom of those. But also then again, aligning those to the vision, like, okay, where do we want to get to? Why are we trying to get to that? And going back to that question of, bringing the why back into the team and giving some real tools to those teams. So in those scenarios, it is important to understand what are you trying to get to, and those sort of principles of why. And then sort of bringing in some of the needs for, okay, what am I trying to get to? What is the bench strength that I have in the team? What are the skills? And where do this team best add their value to meeting those goals? Because we need those, like we were saying earlier, we need these different types of skills to bring in. So a lot of it was about repositioning people or trying to get them to do different types of roles. And in some cases, even there has been situations where you just got to have some rather difficult conversations with people to say, hey, look, are you really doing what you think? They might love doing a certain thing, but that might not be their strength. So then trying to figure out what is the right role, what kind of role do you want to play, and try, that is where you really find yourself as a leader, giving a lot of benefit back to the careers of people that you are leading as well, because you can ideally have some of these conversations to help them maybe pivot even their career path to get to that next thing that they need to get to, because otherwise they might find themselves constantly getting blocked at one place and another hurdle, because, for whatever reason, it could be they don't have the correct skill set or the right kind of sort of communication sort of tools in their armory, like they might want to be a people manager, but maybe they're not great at being able to do performance reviews, for example, with their team, so then how do they, so a lot of these things can be learned as well. But then as you learn more about it, I often find, the team members, colleagues will learn, okay, is that really what I want to do as well? So, so there's to answer your question, I think at the end of the day, in some cases, it's a culture that you have to build in as you grow the team, and you do have to be quite mindful of it. And other times you do have to come in and try to rearrange the culture a little bit. But I think one thing I would say is that changing culture is hard. It takes time. It takes a fair bit of time. It's not a case of months. It's a case of years, to change culture and change it well and change it properly and make it stick. It takes years. So always start small, take on the little things that you can do. It might be as simple as changing some very small processes within your organization to help people. It might be, it's incredibly difficult for them to requisition hardware, or something like that. My laptop's falling apart. I just can't get a new one, or how can I help? And that is very frustrating, and just figure out what are the little things that you could do. And maybe that's a hard thing, but, maybe it's not. So start small and build slowly and be consistent, stick to those sort of principles of being accountable and always being present, and slowly, add those extra things that you can do to change the culture. And over time, you can build it and you will build it. But, there are things that you definitely can change. But it's like a ship, like a big ship. You just have to gradually shift. And once you do, it'll stick to that course, and then you can make little corrections as you go along. So I would say, don't try to rush. If you make too many big changes too quickly, particularly in large organizations, you can get into situations where the team is not going to come along for that ride. They wouldn't like it, and you wouldn't get the best out of them and play to their strengths. Because at the end of the day, we can't change a team overnight, and you can't do that anyway. So you want to make sure that you can grow the team into that sort of culture slowly, and they need to be brought into it as well. And the other thing I keep thinking is that no two organizations are the same, no two teams are the same, no two products are the same, and obviously no two problems that we're solving are the same. So you do have to keep those individual problems, in mind. So it's never a single one-size-fits-all sort of recipe either.
Yeah.
So and that comes through learning, and so if you do it gradually in small increments and chunks, you will be able to get that feedback loop going, learn from the changes, and is it working, is it not?
Yeah. Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Is it Will Smith who said, like, well, how do you do it? You just bite more than you can chew and start chewing or something? I don't know. But you're right, though. You just one bite at a time.
No, it was Will Smith. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Well, I just think about him like going up and slapping people. But
Oh, God.
It's going back to that culture. I think a cultural change is such an important thing. And then, to what you just said as well, is like having that clear goal of where you want it to be, and then the purpose of what it is, and then the why, and figuring out how you're going to get there and just doing it slowly and implementing. Because I think, when a business identifies there is a cultural shift, I think it's a very difficult thing to shift from the way we've always done things to where we should be. If people don't have the right mindset.
Yeah. And then, Sam, I guess in your line of work, you come across a lot of organizations, and how often do you see culture shift needed in an organization? I mean, it's I'm assuming
that's such an interesting question. And I think for me personally, we don't, you talk to engineering leaders when they're hiring, and they when you dig deep enough, they want to do it, or they had that problem to solve. It's just whether they've got the actual ability to do so in terms of whether it be authority from CEO or powers that be, the board, whatever that might be. And if they do, then happy days. We can help. We can find the right people. So at the moment, to give you an example, we're looking for a principal engineer who is capable of uplifting the engineering culture.
Right.
They don't want them to manage, but they want them to improve the coding standards, the fundamentals of the team. There are people in the team who are, seniors, but they're not really at a senior level. Right. They're not performing well enough. They don't want to get the great people. They've got really good, solid foundational knowledge of the team, of the product that they're working on. If they were to get rid of them, it'd be horrible to start from scratch, and it's not a good look anyway. So they can improve them. The people are open. They're coachable. That's what. But they need someone to improve the standards, and it's not. And it's about how, not just about. It's about how they're delivering their products. They're overcomplicating things that don't need to be complicated. How they structure their code. There's a lot of things that could be fixed. So that in itself is a driver of change, right?
Yes.
And you're smiling. What are you smiling about?
It's very true. I totally agree.
Yeah. So that is like a clear example of like having that change of that culture of being able to implement and having that authority. A lot of companies, when they are sort of hiring, it's like they don't. A lot of companies, when I speak to them, they don't think they have that cultural problem. A lot of companies that I speak to honestly think they're the best, that they think they are Google, or they think they are Canva or something like that, they don't have problems. It's funny when I do actually speak to people from those companies, they're usually the first to admit that they do have a problem, or they have something that they need to change, or they're never perfect. They're always changing and innovating and stuff and improving. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think it is one of the pillars of of the high performing culture is that you're always, and one thing I love about WTW where we work now is that, we have this mindset of just improve relentlessly.
Yeah. Oh, good.
And there's a lot of aspects to that. It's always training, looking for opportunities to learn, innovation ideas, doing hackathons, internal hackathons, global hackathons. Just we are constantly looking to improve relentlessly. Process improvement, coding standards, security aspects, and it's more important than ever. Like we're talking earlier, and it's really important. And I think I don't think, particularly with this very changing landscape, with things like AI coming into this our world recently, taking real prominence more recently. It's always been around, bubbling away, and it's just the speed of what we need to do things has changed into your gear. That also means that you have to perform, their team has to be one step ahead as well. So that makes it even more important. And I think to be able to always improve, have this mindset of always looking how I can do something better. It's super important. And as leaders, I think you need, on behalf of your team, you need to be looking and encouraging your team to always be improving themselves as well. And it's, I think that's really important. And it's, if you don't, you don't want to be ending up in the Kodak, moment, so to speak.
Yeah. Was W2W, did that always have that type of culture for when you came to the business?
Yeah. Yes, I think they've always been a very high bench strength. That's one of the things I liked about WTW when I first joined them, is that the culture has a very high bench strength, and what's the word? The talent density is quite high.
I love that word.
It's really interesting because when we recruit, and you all to recruit as well for us, and it's difficult recruiting for us because we are careful who we bring in. We're not a huge team. We're not at the size of, let's say, although we're a large organization within our business unit, we are, not like the Microsofts or the AWS.
100%. Yeah.
So we have to be careful who we bring in. And so we do take time, but we also try to recruit quickly without, wasting people's time in that process. But at the same time, we're careful who we bring in. So the talent density was quite high. And I loved that. And they had this culture of always learning and having these programs of being able to, like, for example, one thing, everyone who joins our company in our technology area has access to Pluralsight, and you can do any course there at any time you like.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And just do as many as you like, and we provide time to do it. We even have allocated time. We have meeting free times, each week, that sort of thing. So it's highly encouraged to improve and get certifications and so on. And that's been going on for quite some, which is quite nice. But what we have done, I think, in the last few years, and one of the things that I've been also encouraging my team to do, my product family to do, is to do more sort of innovative ideas, to give time and space to do more innovation hackathons and to come up with ideas. Just, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Give it a shot. Give something, and if you have an idea, let's give it a shot. Let's try it out. Give some of that incubation space. And actually, what's been happening is we develop through ideas, and some like, okay, that's great. Maybe we need to keep working on it. Maybe that, and the team might say, oh, that we tried that, we realized that doesn't work. Yeah, and that's a great bit of learning. Okay, that to know that something doesn't work, rather than spending 6 months building something in the future. Like you learned it in a few days of hack, or you'll go, that is great. Let's put that in the next version of the product release. So, so that level of innovation, I think, has really also kicked into the next gear. Which is, I'm really excited about it. Yeah, that's really cool.
So, are you implementing like a dedicated innovation time for your staff?
We do. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So
one of my other clients does that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we do that very regularly as well. And, I think we try to at least do it once a quarter. But it doesn't always happen once a quarter because of various reasons, but, at least a couple of times a year. And in some cases, it's a global event as well.
All right.
Which is fantastic. So we have teams who work in other parts of the world, like in the UK and the US and so on, and other parts of the world as well. But we try to do a global hackathon, which is quite interesting because you got to work across time zones and things like that as well. So it is fun actually. It's fun.
Yeah, it would be.
We have awards and all sorts of things as part of it. So it's a little bit like, I guess, Atlassian do the whole ship it concept, I think, which is quite fun from what I can tell. And, it's a similar thing, but I suppose as a different scale, though.
Yeah, how good.
Yeah.
All right. Raj, mate, this has been great. It's been very informative. I think we always like to close with a couple of typical sort of well-rounded questions I'd love to ask people. Book, mate, you've mentioned a couple. So what do you think would be your favorite leadership book that you think you've learned the most out of?
Yeah, no, great. I just want to say I love reading.
Yeah, I love reading too. Yeah.
I am one of these weirdos who go on holiday and read tech books.
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah.
Everyone else is reading novels, But as my career moved on, I started reading more and more, and I love reading. I'll give you a couple, if that's okay.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Is that all right? I think I mentioned Start With Why. I love that book, Simon Sinek. It's a simple book, and the concept is quite simple. And I like it for that fact that it is simple, and the fact that you do need to have a why in everything you do, personal level, but also product level, engineering level. Just for the team to set direction and goals is really important. If you don't know where you're going, your North Star needs to be pretty clear. That's great. Another one I quite enjoyed reading and drawn a lot of information from is a book called No Rules Rules. This
Netflix one.
Yeah, Netflix. This is by Reed Hastings. Great book as well. I don't think when I read it, I think he was the CEO of Netflix, but I don't think he is anymore. I think he's moved on, but great book, and he talks about talent density. Talent density is gone
the most,
Yeah, it's a fantastic, and there's a great concept in there, and this is particularly to high-performing teams, a really important one about radical candor, and there's a concept called radical candor, and there's actually a book. And the third one I would like to say is one called Radical Candor.
Radical Candor, by the actual book.
It's a book, and it's written by a lady called Kim Scott.
Right.
And she used to work for Google for many years, and then she worked with Dropbox and a couple of other companies as well.
That was just the ability to... Sorry, keep going.
Yeah.
Interrupt people if you thought that they were saying was wrong, right? Is that radical candor? Is that the idea of it?
That's right. Having honest conversations. Yeah. And if I could just sum it up, it's having honest conversations with people in your team because you care.
Yeah, you care for them.
You care, but you want them to do their best and to have and to have honest conversations. It's a really great book. And I highly recommend it for any tech leader.
Radical Candor.
Radical Candor. Yeah, cool. It's a good one. And mention one more just for fun, and it's nothing to do with tech, but I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it, and a lot of people have. Sapiens. It's about by.
It's all right.
You do like it?
Yeah, not like. Keep going.
Why didn't you like it? I'd like to.
It was just too long.
Oh, I see.
And it was too dry.
You didn't find it interesting?
The way he writes, Yuval Noah, I was so hyped up to read it.
Yeah.
I read both. I haven't finished reading Sapiens, but I was...
Okay.
And Homo Deus was the other one. He's the other one.
Yeah.
But it was...
That one,
it just... I don't know. I thought he could have got to the point a lot quicker with a lot of things, but I guess that's not the point of the book, right? So...
Because it's a history of... Yeah. Because I think I found the early history... really interesting. The later history, because that's a little bit of, you get to know, we seem to know more about later history.
Sure.
But the reason I like it, I think, was that how humans came to be the way we are. And it, in a lot of ways, it explains why we do the things we do. I think if I apply that back to the tech world, it's nice to know what drives us as human beings. That's good. And why we do, in particularly in leadership, what are the things that drives us to do what we want to do? How can you help? But also, if you're building product, what is it about the product that's great, and what is it that you want to get out of it. So I find it fascinating to know how we went from sort of ape-like hunter-gatherers and all of a sudden going through that industrial revolution and, farming revolution and so on. Yeah. It's quite interesting. And so that part of it is fascinating.
I can definitely see those.
Why are we now living in an urbanized sort of society and doing what we do? And, and you can see the trajectory, how it's sort of increasing the speed of innovation.
Yeah.
And innovations.
Well, it does life. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is definitely a increasing rate of sort of innovation and technology. So we'll see where it ends up, but it's exciting. AI definitely has a big part to play in that.
I know, right? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Who is the most influential person in your career and why?
Oh, good question. I think when you're young, your parents have a big influence on you. And I think, when I was young, I was saying my dad, who used to buy me all these sort of, circuit boards and computers and things, obviously has a big part of, that influence. But I think your influence changes over time. I found that as I got older, I started to sort of look to, the technology leaders and the leaders in the industry as the people who influence you. That might, I used to really love reading about Richard Branson and what he did and, how he just touched so many different industries along the way and how he was, and there was a lot of failure as well, and how he was trying to fly his first airplane when he launched Virgin Atlantic. And I don't think he had the license to do it a few minutes before the plane actually was supposed to leave the tarmac. So it was amazing, and
so good at that.
I mean, he's amazing.
You have to sell him before doing anything, I found. But
absolutely. And even guys like Elon Musk, whether you like him or you don't, and it's the fact that he can put a stake on the ground and say, okay, we're going to Mars and doing things to get there. It's quite incredible that, he, having that goal of making humans a sort of multi-planetary species, as he calls it, right? It's quite amazing. So I think those things are interesting to draw on, but then always apply your own filter back into it. But probably finally, though, I would like to add that I've been quite lucky in my career to have some really great mentors and leaders. People like my managers and others who always given me great advice along the way, and I can always reach out to, from a phone call or email or have a beer or have lunch or whatever, and we catch up from time to time. And some of them are not in Australia, a lot of them are in like US and other places, but it's so nice to be able to have that sort of group of people that you can say, what do you think I should do? And, just have, know that, I would always encourage people to build at least a small network of sort of mentors or even a couple of mentors in everyone's career. And I think that really helps as well.
Yeah.
And they influence you in a big way because particularly people who you aspire or you really like.
Yeah. Who would you give the shout out to?
One
person.
Yeah. I think I'll mention a guy called Richard Newell. He's a guy who I used to work at Itron with, and he was not my direct boss, but he was managing director at the time when I was working there, and we still catch up and have lunch whenever we can. Wonderful guy, avid runner. If you're listening out there, Richard, he's a fantastic human being. I really love talking to him and asking for his advice when I need it.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, cool. What habits do you contribute to your success, if you were to name?
That's assuming I'm successful.
It's assuming you're successful.
Yeah, that's right. No, well, I think. Look, I think I like being, first of all, humble about what I can achieve and what I have achieved. I think that's real. That's me personally. You don't have to be, not everyone's like that, but because that way you're sort of hungry to also grow to that next step because you haven't got there yet, so it's always looking to that next step. Always look forward, I'm not sure it was Carl Lewis or someone like that who said that if, how do you stay number one? It's like, I just think I'm always number two.
Oh, it's
So
freaking great. I like that.
so it's a great one. But I think the other thing is just always look to learn. Always be hungry to learn. Whether that's through whichever mechanism works for you. Reading, podcast, talking to people, working with mentors. Just be always open-minded about what you don't know. Even when when you think you know, be open to question yourself. Question everything. Like people say, it's quite important to be critical, and that'll keep your field of vision open. And we sometimes forget that, and I personally would forget that. And I love that I have kids who can tell me that sometimes. So it's great.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Stay hungry.
Stay hungry, mate. Yeah. Our David Goggins, his fringe is never full.
Right.
That's his thing.
Yes.
Never full.
It's never
Always
full.
hungry.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Raj. Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you, Sam. Cheers.
Yeah.